What happens when wealth and status collide with true merit in today's elite institutions? At prestigious Westfield Academy, Diane Harrington believed her family name and donations entitled her son to special treatment. But when she stormed into the principal's office to demand answers, she faced Dr. Marcus Carter, a black educator whose impeccable credentials and unwavering principles were about to shatter her worldview. How will she react when her threats and assumptions are methodically dismantled by the very man she attempted to intimidate? Dear viewer, watch or listen this full story to witness this powerful confrontation and discover if privilege can be transformed into something more meaningful. And, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The morning sun cast long shadows across Westfield Academy's pristine campus as Diane Harrington strode purposefully toward the administrative building. Her designer heels clicked rhythmically against the cobblestone path, each step radiating the confidence that came with her family name and the substantial endowment her husband had recently provided to the prestigious private school. Her immaculately tailored cream Chanel suit and diamond accessories announced her status long before she introduced herself, a walking billboard of privilege and wealth that had opened doors for her throughout her life. Today, those doors included the one to Westfield Academy's administrative offices, where she intended to resolve what she considered an outrageous affront to her family's dignity. Her son, Bradley, a sophomore with mediocre grades but an impressive family legacy, had been denied a position on the school's Model United Nations team, a prestigious extracurricular activity that looked excellent on college applications. The rejection letter had arrived yesterday, and Diane had spent the evening consoling her disappointed son while privately seething about the injustice of it all. "I'm here to see whoever's in charge of the Model UN program," she announced to the receptionist, not bothering with pleasantries. "There's been a mistake regarding my son Bradley's application." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman who had witnessed this type of parental intervention countless times, smiled politely. "Dr. Carter oversees all student organizations, including Model UN. He's with someone at the moment, but he should be available shortly if you'd like to wait." "Dr. Carter?" Diane asked, the unfamiliar name catching her off guard. "What happened to Dr. Whitmore?" "He's been the academic director for years. Dr. Whitmore retired at the end of last semester. Dr. Marcus Carter joined us as the new principal and academic director in July." The receptionist gestured to a comfortable seating area. "You're welcome to have a seat while you wait." Diane reluctantly settled into one of the plush chairs, scrolling through emails on her phone to avoid the appearance of having nothing better to do than wait. After 15 minutes, which felt like an eternity to someone accustomed to immediate attention, the receptionist informed her that Dr. Carter could see her now. Smoothing her skirt and straightening her shoulders, Diane entered the principal's office, the argument she'd rehearsed in the car ready on her lips. She stopped short when she saw the man behind the desk. Dr. Marcus Carter was not what she had expected. In his early 40s, he was a black man with a distinguished salt and pepper beard and thoughtful eyes behind stylish glasses. His navy blue suit was impeccably tailored, and several advanced degrees hung framed on the wall behind him, including a doctorate from Harvard's Graduate School of Education. "Mrs. Harrington, I presume?" He stood and extended his hand with a warm smile. "I'm Marcus Carter. It's a pleasure to meet you." Diane hesitated before taking his hand, the script she'd prepared suddenly requiring revision. "Yes, I don't believe we've met. I was expecting Dr. Whitmore. I took over when Stephen retired. Please, have a seat." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "How can I help you today?" Diane sat stiffly, her gaze darting to the credentials on display behind him. She hadn't anticipated this scenario, but she quickly reminded herself that her purpose remained unchanged, regardless of who occupied the office. "My son Bradley received a rejection letter from the Model UN program yesterday," she began, her voice carrying the practiced tone of someone accustomed to getting her way. "There must be some mistake. The Harringtons have been part of Westfield for 3 generations, and my husband's family recently donated $2 million toward the new science building. Dr. Carter nodded, his expression neutral. I'm familiar with Bradley and your family's generous contributions to our school. But I'm afraid there's no mistake about the Model UN selections. The committee follows a rigorous evaluation process based on academic performance, essay quality, and faculty recommendations. That's precisely why I'm here, Diane pressed, leaning forward. Bradley's grades are perfectly adequate, and with our family's standing, I'd have expected some consideration. Dr. Carter's eyebrows raised slightly. Mrs. Harrington, adequate isn't our standard at Westfield, especially for competitive programs like Model UN. We received applications from students with exceptional academic records and demonstrated leadership abilities. Diane felt her temper flaring. The man wasn't taking the hint. Perhaps you don't understand. The Harrington name is on the library wing. My husband sits on the board of trustees. Bradley's grandfather was a founding benefactor of this school. I'm very aware of your family's history with Westfield, Dr. Carter replied calmly. But my responsibility is to ensure that all students receive equal consideration based on their own merits, not their family names or financial contributions. Something in his measured response and unwavering gaze pushed Diane over the edge. The subtle implication that her son had been judged fairly and found wanting struck at her pride. I see, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. You're new here, so perhaps you don't fully appreciate how things work at institutions like Westfield. Schools like this were built by families like mine, for children like mine. She glanced pointedly around the office, taking in Dr. Carter's credentials again with a dismissive eye. I'd hate for your progressive approach to cause friction with the families who support this school. Especially so early in your tenure. The implication hung in the air between them, a thinly veiled threat wrapped in condescension. Dr. Carter's expression remained unchanged, though something flickered briefly in his eyes. Mrs. Harrington, I'd be happy to discuss Bradley's application specifically if you'd like to understand where improvements could be made for future opportunities. The committee provided detailed feedback for all applicants. I'm not interested in feedback, Diane snapped, her facade of civility crumbling. I'm interested in results. My son deserves that spot on the team, and I expect you to rectify this situation immediately. She stood up, her voice rising as she continued, I don't know how you ran things at whatever public school you came from, but at Westfield, we have standards and traditions. People in your position should understand that keeping major donors and board members happy is part of the job. The receptionist and several staff members in the outer office had fallen silent, clearly able to hear every word through the partially open door. Diane didn't care. In fact, she preferred an audience. Public pressure often produced faster results. Let me be absolutely clear, she continued, her voice dripping with disdain. I could make one phone call and have half the board questioning your judgment. Another call and donors might reconsider their pledges. Is that really the start you want to your first semester here? Dr. Carter rose from his chair slowly, his calm demeanor unbroken. He closed the office door quietly before returning to his desk. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried an unmistakable strength. Mrs. Harrington, before we continue this conversation, I'd like to clarify something. You seem to be operating under several misconceptions, and I feel it's my duty to address them. He folded his hands on the desk. First, I didn't come from some public school. Prior to accepting the position at Westfield, I served as the chief academic officer at Phillips Exeter Academy for 5 years. Before that, I was the dean of students at Sidwell Friends School in Washington, D.C. Both institutions, as I'm sure you're aware, have their own distinguished histories and generous benefactors. Diane blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Second, Dr. Carter continued, your assumption that I don't understand how things work is incorrect. I understand perfectly. I've been navigating spaces like this my entire academic career, from my days as a scholarship student at Groton, through Princeton and Harvard, and throughout my 20-year career in education. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. What you seem not to understand, Mrs. Harrington, is that I was hired by your husband's board specifically because of my commitment to merit-based opportunity and educational excellence. The board unanimously supported my vision for Westfield's future, which includes maintaining the highest standards for all programs and ensuring that every student earns their achievements. Diane felt a flush creeping up her neck, but Dr. Carter wasn't finished. Third, regarding your son Bradley. He's a young man with potential, but his academic record shows consistent underperformance. His GPA places him in the bottom quartile of his class. His Model UN application essay was half the required length and contained multiple grammatical errors that suggest it was written hastily. His history teacher, who supervises the program, noted that Bradley has been late to class 8 times this semester and has turned in 3 assignments past deadline. He opened a folder on his desk. Would you like me to continue with the feedback? Because I've reviewed his file thoroughly, and I'd be happy to discuss strategies for helping Bradley improve his academic performance and develop the kind of responsibility and work ethic that would make him a stronger candidate for future opportunities. Diane stood frozen, her prepared arguments evaporating in the face of Dr. Carter's methodical dismantling of her position. Finally, he said, his voice gentler now, about your implicit threat to call board members or discourage donations. Feel free to do so. Chairman Thompson and I had breakfast just yesterday, and he was quite enthusiastic about the academic rigor we're restoring to Westfield's programs. As for donations, while we deeply appreciate the generosity of our community, Westfield's endowment stands at $478 million. We value contributions for what they help us accomplish for our students, not as leverage for special treatment. He stood and walked around the desk, leaning against it as he faced her directly. Mrs. Harrington, I believe we share a common goal, we both want Bradley to succeed. But real success comes from earning achievements, not having them handed to you. What lesson would we be teaching him if we gave him a position he didn't earn, simply because his family has money and influence? The question hung in the air between them, piercing through Diane's indignation. She opened her mouth to respond, but found she had no ready answer. Now, Dr. Carter continued, I'd be happy to schedule a meeting with Bradley to discuss how he can strengthen his candidacy for the Spring Model UN Conference, or perhaps identify other activities that might better align with his interests and abilities. I see from his file that he showed some aptitude for creative writing last year. We have an excellent literary magazine that's always looking for contributors. Diane felt utterly outmaneuvered. Her usual tactics, intimidation, social pressure, thinly veiled threats, had not only failed but had been turned back on her with devastating precision. What's worse, everything Dr. Carter said made logical sense, which left her with no reasonable counterargument. I'll need to discuss this with my husband, she managed, gathering her composure. And with Bradley. Of course, Dr. Carter nodded, walking to the door and opening it for her. My door is always open to parents and students alike. Please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything else I can help with. As Diane walked through the office, acutely aware of the staff who had undoubtedly overheard much of the exchange, her face burned with embarrassment. She had come expecting to easily intimidate a new administrator, only to find herself thoroughly outclassed by someone whose credentials and capabilities far exceeded her assumptions. Mrs. Harrington, Dr. Carter called just as she reached the outer door. She turned reluctantly. One more thing you should know. The student who was selected for the position Bradley applied for is Gabrielle Johnson. Her mother works as a custodian here at Westfield, and Gabrielle attends on a full scholarship. She has a 4.0 GPA, perfect attendance, and her application essay on diplomatic solutions to the water crisis in sub-Saharan Africa was so impressive that the Model UN faculty advisor is submitting it to a national essay competition. Diane nodded stiffly, unable to form a response. Her mother may clean the classrooms, Dr. Carter continued, but Gabrielle earned her place on that team through hard work and genuine merit. That's the standard at Westfield, the only standard that matters under my leadership. With those words hanging in the air, Diane walked out of the building, her carefully constructed worldview shaken to its core. Diane's drive home passed in a blur of conflicting emotions, anger, embarrassment, and an unsettling sense that perhaps she had been in the wrong. The large houses of her neighborhood, each set back from the street behind manicured landscaping, suddenly seemed like theatrical backdrops, elaborate props in a performance of success. She pulled into the circular driveway of her Georgian colonial home and found Bradley sprawled on the leather sofa in the study, his laptop open but his attention focused on the phone in his hand. "Bradley," she said, her voice sharper than she intended, "I thought you were working on your history assignment." Her son looked up, startled. "I am. I'm just taking a break." Diane glanced at his laptop screen, which showed an unfinished document with a heading but little else. "How long have you been taking a break?" Bradley shrugged, the gesture so dismissive it sent a pang through Diane's heart. "I don't know. 20 minutes, maybe." "And how much of the assignment have you completed?" Another shrug. "I've got the introduction paragraph. It's due Thursday, Mom. I have plenty of time." Diane sat down beside him, seeing her son with new eyes after Dr. Carter's assessment. Had she and Richard been too lenient, too quick to make excuses for Bradley's lack of effort? "Bradley, we need to talk about the Model UN rejection," she began, watching his face closely. His expression darkened. "Did you talk to the principal? Are they going to reconsider? Dad said you'd take care of it." The expectation in his voice, the assumption that his mother would fix this for him, struck Diane with uncomfortable force. It was the same tone she had used with service staff all her life, the same entitlement she had displayed in Dr. Carter's office just hours ago. "No, they're not reconsidering," she said carefully. "Dr. Carter explained their selection criteria, and, well, there were issues with your application." Bradley's face flushed. "Like what?" "I did everything they asked for." "Did you?" Diane countered gently. "The essay was late and incomplete. Your grades aren't competitive. Your teacher noted you've been consistently late to class." "So?" Bradley replied, his voice rising defensively. "Dad said that stuff doesn't really matter for people like us. The Harrington name opens doors, that's what he always says." The words hit Diane like a physical blow. It was exactly the message she and Richard had been sending their son, intentionally or not, for his entire life. "Bradley, I think we, your father and I, have given you the wrong impression," she admitted, the words difficult to form. "Yes, privilege and connections can create opportunities, but they aren't substitutes for actual achievement. The world is changing, and the name alone isn't enough anymore." Bradley looked at her suspiciously, as though wondering who had replaced his mother with this strange woman speaking unfamiliar truths. "Since when do you believe that? You're always telling the staff what to do and expecting everyone to bend over backward because you're Mrs. Harrington." The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Diane had indeed navigated most of her adult life with the expectation that her wealth and status entitled her to special treatment. Why wouldn't Bradley have absorbed the same lesson? "I'm beginning to see that I've been wrong about many things," she said softly. "And I don't want my mistakes to hold you back from becoming the man you could be." She took a deep breath. "Dr. Carter suggested some options that might help you improve academically. There's a tutoring program, and he mentioned you showed promise in creative writing. The literary magazine might be a good fit for you." "The Lit magazine?" Bradley scoffed. "That's for nerds and scholarship kids." "Gabrielle Johnson does it," Diane replied, the name slipping out before she could consider the implications. Bradley's expression shifted from disdain to curiosity. "Gabrielle? The girl who's always raising her hand in English. What about her?" "She got the Model UN spot you applied for," Diane explained. "She has a perfect GPA and wrote an essay so impressive it's being submitted to a national competition." "Yeah, but she's not," Bradley stopped himself, perhaps recognizing the dangerous territory his thought was venturing into. "I mean, she's smart and everything, but she's not exactly from our social circle." "Her mother is a custodian," Diane confirmed. "And yes, Gabrielle earned a spot on a team that you wanted but didn't work for. That should tell you something important about how the world is changing, Bradley. Merit matters more than it used to." Bradley fell silent, processing this unexpected perspective from his mother. Finally, he asked, "So what am I supposed to do?" Just accept that I didn't get it. No, Diane replied, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. You're supposed to earn it next time. Work harder. Apply yourself. Prove that you deserve the opportunities you want. She stood up, a plan forming in her mind. I'll help you create a study schedule, and your father will review your assignments before you submit them. No more last-minute efforts. No more late submissions. If you want to be on Model UN in the spring, you'll need to raise your GPA substantially this semester. As Bradley returned to his history assignment with renewed focus, Diane stepped out of the study, her mind spinning with the implications of the promises she had just made. The conversation with Dr. Carter had shaken her more deeply than she cared to admit, challenging not just her approach to her son's education but her entire worldview. She had always viewed life as a competitive game where the rules applied differently to people like her, where wealth, status, and connections were trump cards that overrode the ordinary metrics of merit and achievement. Dr. Carter had exposed the fundamental flaw in that perspective. It produced entitlement rather than excellence, dependency rather than capability. As uncomfortable as the revelation was, Diane couldn't deny its truth. She had seen it in Bradley's expectation that she would fix his rejection, in his dismissal of classmates who actually worked for their achievements, in his shock at the idea that his name might not be enough to secure his future. With a sigh, Diane reached for her phone and pulled up her husband's number. Richard needed to know about her conversation with Dr. Carter, and more importantly, about the promises she had made to Bradley. If they were going to help their son develop the kind of character and competence that would serve him in the real world, they would need to present a united front. The following week, Bradley Harrington sat nervously in Dr. Carter's office, his father Richard beside him. Unlike Diane's confrontational approach, Richard had requested a proper meeting to discuss his son's academic performance and future at Westfield. I appreciate you making time for us, Dr. Carter, Richard said, his tone respectful. I've reviewed Bradley's records, and frankly, I'm concerned. I wasn't aware his grades had slipped so significantly. Dr. Carter nodded. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Harrington. Your involvement means a lot. Bradley is at a critical juncture in his academic career, and with the right support, I believe he can turn things around. Bradley stared at his shoes, clearly uncomfortable but also relieved that the adults were addressing the situation honestly. The Model UN rejection was actually a wake-up call for me, Richard admitted. It made me realize I've been so focused on my work that I haven't been paying attention to Bradley's education the way I should have. I've been assuming that because we've provided him with every advantage, he was thriving. Dr. Carter smiled sympathetically. It's a common assumption. But even at Westfield, students need guidance, structure, and appropriate expectations. Bradley has significant potential, his standardized test scores show strong aptitude, particularly in analytical thinking. The issue seems to be more about motivation and developing good study habits. Bradley looked up, surprised by the positive assessment embedded in the criticism. I'd like to propose a plan, Dr. Carter continued, pulling out a document he'd prepared. We have an excellent academic coaching program that pairs struggling students with high-achieving peers for regular study sessions. I think Bradley would benefit from this structure, along with weekly check-ins with our academic counselor. Richard nodded, reviewing the proposed plan. This looks comprehensive. What do you think, Bradley? I guess it could help, Bradley admitted reluctantly. But the Model UN thing. I really wanted that. Dr. Carter leaned forward. Bradley, what interested you about Model UN specifically? The boy shrugged. Honestly? At first, just that it looks good on college applications. But then I saw them practicing debates in the Commons, talking about real-world problems. It seemed important, you know. Dr. Carter nodded. That interest in meaningful debate is valuable. While Model UN isn't an option this semester, we have a new ethics bowl team forming that addresses similar skills, critical thinking, persuasive speaking, collaborative problem solving. It's less established than our Model UN program, which means there's room for motivated students to make their mark. For the first time, Bradley looked genuinely interested. Could I try out for that? You could, Dr. Carter agreed. But I'd suggest focusing on bringing your grades up first. The Ethics Bowl team will still be there next semester, and you'd enter from a position of strength. Richard placed a hand on his son's shoulder. I think that's a reasonable approach, don't you? Focus on the fundamentals now, then pursue these extracurriculars from a stronger position. Bradley nodded slowly. Yeah, okay. I can do that. As the meeting concluded, Richard lingered after Bradley had been excused. Dr. Carter, I owe you an apology. My wife mentioned your conversation last week. I'm embarrassed by her approach. Dr. Carter waved it off. No apology necessary. Educational partnerships between schools and families can be emotionally charged. We all want what's best for our children. Still, Richard insisted, there's no excuse for the assumptions she made or the way she spoke to you. I want you to know that doesn't reflect our family's values. I'm actually grateful that you're holding Westfield to high standards. That's what we're paying for, after all, excellence, not entitlement. Dr. Carter nodded appreciatively. Thank you for that, Mr. Harrington. And please, call me Marcus. Richard, the other man replied, extending his hand. And I meant what I said about the board's confidence in your leadership. Some of the old guard might grumble about change, but most of us recognize that Westfield needs to evolve to maintain its standing. The world our children are entering values merit and innovation, not just pedigree. As Richard left, Dr. Carter found himself reflecting on the contrasting approaches of Westfield's parents. For every Diane who expected special treatment, there were parents like Richard who genuinely valued educational excellence. The challenge was helping both types understand that true privilege came from earning achievements, not being handed them. 3 months later, the winter semester was drawing to a close. Dr. Carter stood in the back of Westfield's auditorium, watching with pride as the Model UN team presented a simulation of their recent competition victory to the entire school. Gabrielle Johnson, the scholarship student who had earned her place over Bradley Harrington, was presenting a compelling argument on sustainable development goals with poise and eloquence that belied her 16 years. A movement at the auditorium entrance caught his eye. Diane Harrington slipped in quietly, taking a seat in the back row. Their paths had crossed only briefly since their confrontation, with Diane noticeably avoiding school events where she might encounter him. After the presentation, as students and faculty mingled during the reception, Dr. Carter was surprised to see Diane approaching him, her expression more subdued than during their last encounter. Dr. Carter, she began, her voice lacking its previous edge. That was quite impressive. The team clearly represented Westfield well at the competition. Thank you, Mrs. Harrington. They worked incredibly hard and earned every accolade they received. He studied her carefully, wondering what had prompted this unexpected appearance. I wanted to let you know that Bradley's midterm grades arrived yesterday, she said after a moment. He's improved significantly. His history teacher sent a personal note mentioning his increased participation and timeliness. Dr. Carter smiled. I'm glad to hear it. The academic coaching program seems to be working for him. His counselor mentioned he's been consistently attending his sessions. Diane nodded, fidgeting with her wedding ring. Yes, well. Richard and I have implemented some changes at home as well. Less screen time, more structured study hours. And she hesitated, clearly finding the next part difficult. Richard has been more involved in reviewing his assignments. I have too, when my schedule allows. That kind of parental engagement makes an enormous difference, Dr. Carter affirmed. I've also made Bradley's allowance contingent on maintaining at least A/B average, she added with the hint of a smile. Amazing how motivating that can be. They shared a knowing look, finding common ground in the universal challenge of motivating teenagers. Dr. Carter, I owe you an apology, Diane finally said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. My behavior in your office was inexcusable. I made assumptions about you that were not only incorrect but prejudiced. I'm embarrassed by how I acted. Apology accepted, he replied simply. We all have moments we're not proud of, Mrs. Harrington. What matters is how we grow from them. She nodded, then gestured toward Gabrielle, who was surrounded by admirers after her impressive presentation. That young woman is remarkable. I understand why she earned her place on the team. She is, Dr. Carter agreed. And she's just one of many extraordinary students here at Westfield who come from all walks of life. Talent and determination aren't limited by zip code or family income. No, they're not, Diane admitted. Though privilege certainly makes the path easier. I'm beginning to understand that Bradley's greatest disadvantage might have been his advantages, never having to struggle for anything, always expecting the path to be cleared for him. Dr. Carter considered this thoughtfully. It's a common paradox in schools like Westfield. Our most privileged students sometimes develop the least resilience because they've faced so few obstacles. That's why maintaining high standards matters. It prepares them for a world that won't always bend to accommodate them. Diane nodded slowly. I see that now. And I've seen how Bradley has responded to actual expectations and accountability. He's prouder of his recent B+ in history than he ever was of the A's he received simply because teachers didn't want to deal with parents like me. They were interrupted by Bradley himself, approaching with a tentative smile. Mom, Dr. Carter, he greeted them. I was just talking to Ms. Winters about the Ethics Bowl team for next semester. She thinks I should apply. That's excellent news, Dr. Carter replied. Based on your recent progress, I'd support that application. Thanks, Bradley said, his confidence visibly bolstered by the principal's approval. I've been reading up on it, and some of the ethical dilemmas they debate are really interesting. As Bradley explained the competition format to his mother, Dr. Carter observed the interaction with satisfaction. This was why he had chosen education, not to enforce rigid hierarchies or preserve outdated systems of privilege, but to help young people discover their capabilities and develop the skills to succeed on their own merits. Westfield Academy, like many elite institutions, had long functioned as a gatekeeper, controlling access to opportunity based often on wealth and family connections rather than talent and potential. Dr. Carter had accepted the position as principal with a clear mission, to transform the school into a true meritocracy while maintaining its commitment to excellence. Cases like Bradley Harrington's represented both the challenge and the promise of that transformation. When held to genuine standards and provided with appropriate support, even the most entitled students could discover the satisfaction of earned achievement. As the reception concluded, Dr. Carter exchanged goodbyes with the Harringtons, noting the remarkable change in Diane's demeanor since their first encounter. Her humility now was as genuine as her arrogance had been then, a transformation perhaps as significant as her son's academic improvement. Walking back to his office, Dr. Carter reflected on the journey ahead. Changing an institution's culture was never easy, particularly one with Westfield's deep-rooted traditions and powerful stakeholders. There would be more Dianes, more confrontations, more resistance to his vision of educational equity. But today had reinforced his conviction that the effort was worthwhile. When excellence was the standard, the only standard, everyone rose to meet it, regardless of background or circumstance. In that rising, students like Bradley discovered their own capabilities, while students like Gabrielle received the recognition their talents deserved. It wasn't perfect equity, the playing field would never be completely level, but it was a meaningful step toward a world where merit mattered more than money, and achievement was valued for how it was earned, not simply for what it represented. For Dr. Marcus Carter, that was a legacy worth building, one student and one parent at a time. Dear friend, this story reminds us that true excellence can't be purchased or inherited, it must be earned through dedication and character. In a world that often confuses privilege with merit, we need leaders brave enough to uphold standards and recognize talent wherever it appears, regardless of background. When we judge people by their contributions rather than their connections, we create communities where everyone has the opportunity to shine. Those who've never faced obstacles often struggle most when finally challenged, while those who've overcome barriers develop the resilience needed for genuine success. If this story made you reflect on how privilege and bias operate in our everyday interactions, please hit the like button to help others discover these important truths. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that challenge assumptions and celebrate the dignity that comes from achievement earned through authentic effort.